Now that you all are chromosome experts, we're going to get into some more details on genetics and inheritance and how that all works, okay? So why do we look the way that we look? Why do we have certain features that run in families, but you might have like one sibling that doesn't look like the rest of the siblings? Like, what is going on with that? Like, where do these traits come from, and why do some show up more than others? Well, let's start from zero here. What is a trait? It's just any type of distinguishing characteristic that you can inherit. So this could be eye color, hair color, skin color, things like the shape of your nose or your hairline, stuff like that. Of course, humans aren't the only things. So in plants, it could be leaf shape, overall height of plants, flower color. In animals, things like coloration or tail length or any type of thing, right? And so all these things are hereditary. And that just means that they can get passed on from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next, okay? And this is what genetics is we're looking at inheritance patterns and the kind of variation that there is in living things, okay? That is what we are doing in this class, just in case you were wondering. So let's go back now. Okay, DNA, you know DNA, and you know that DNA can be wrapped around some histone proteins and can be condensed into a chromosome. And you know there's this thing called a gene, right? And a gene is just a segment of DNA that codes for a protein. And oftentimes a gene is also, that protein gives us a trait. Okay? And remember, with our chromosomes, we get half our genetic info from mom and half our dad, right? Remember that with our homologous chromosomes? Okay, so we get 2 copies of every gene because we have 2 copies of every chromosome, one from mom, one from dad. But these copies aren't exactly identical. So we're going to get an eye color gene from mom and an eye color gene from dad, but they're not necessarily going to be the same. They could be different, okay? And that word is an allele. It's a variation of a gene. Okay, and this gives us all of our great diversity. So for eye color, let's say if my dad has blue eyes and my mom has brown eyes, my dad would give me a blue eye allele and my mom would give me possibly a brown eye allele. Okay, so let's get those words written down. It's going to be important to understand them. Okay, so alleles are just alternative forms of a gene, okay, just like a different version. And homozygous, which means you get 2 of the same allele. So you would get 2 blues or 2 browns. That would mean you were homozygous. Heterozygous would be 2 different alleles. So if I got 1 brown allele from mom and 1 blue allele from dad, then I would be heterozygous for my eyes. Okay. Again, don't laugh and be immature, but the prefix homo means the same and hetero means different. And if you think about probably where you've heard those prefixes before, that should maybe make sense to you, right? Okay. All right. So we get 2 copies of every gene, 1 from mom, 1 from dad. Cool. Well, if they're different, well, then why could I get like a blue eye allele and a brown eye allele, but I end up with brown eyes? Like, why not the blue eyes? Like, why do some traits seem to run really common in families and other traits are like really rare? Like what determines if I get the blue eyes or the brown eye allele? Like what happens with that? And this is where it comes down to alleles often being dominant or recessive. Okay, a dominant allele is just the one that's expressed whenever it's present. You could have 1 of it or 2 of it, doesn't matter, but that is what we're going to see. And the reason we see it is because it makes a functioning protein. Okay, so freckles is an example of a dominant allele. If you have 1 or 2, so if this was not for eye color, if this was for freckles, if you got just 1 or both of these that coded for freckles, boom, you got freckles. Why? Because you make a protein, a pigment protein in your skin that makes freckles. That's it. You got it. Now, a recessive allele is one that's expressed when 2 copies of it are present. So you have to have both of them there. If it's recessive, you only need 1 or 2 if it's dominant. Okay, recessive is only expressed when the dominant isn't there, when you have 2 of it. And the reason why is because it makes no protein or non-functioning proteins. People without freckles don't make that pigment protein in your skin, so they can't make a freckle. Okay, so the way that you would get no freckles is if you get no freckles from mom and no freckles from dad. In order to get freckles, you could get freckles from one parent or you could get freckles from both parents. Does that make sense? Okay. One thing to note though, that dominant and recessive does not mean like good or bad, right? Like freckles isn't better or worse than no freckles. It's just variation, but one isn't inherently better than the other. Also, dominant does not mean more common. Okay, here's an example. Having more than 5 fingers on your hands is a dominant trait. Okay. Also, dwarfism is a dominant trait. So, if you are not a dwarf, that means you're homozygous recessive for that trait. If you have 5 fingers on your hands, that means you are homozygous recessive for that trait. Okay, so again, dominant recessive doesn't mean better or worse or more common or less common. It just means either it's expressed when it's there a little bit or it's only expressed when the other one's not there. Okay, some more vocab for you. Genotype and phenotype. Genotype is going back to that like genetic info, the alleles on the genes, and we represent these by capital letters. And more on that in a second, okay? That'll make more sense. The phenotype is just the physical description. So let's take a look at that. In flowers, in like pea plants, there are purple flowers and white flowers, and purple is dominant to white. Now, if we want to give the colors of B, like I said, represented by letters, I don't know why we would do B, but that's just what I had. A homozygous dominant would be big B, big B. And if purple's dominant, the phenotype for that flower would be purple. Heterozygous, okay, it's going to mean one of each. Remember we talked about that, not the same. So one of each. So we're going to have one lowercase, one uppercase. So that means dad and mom each gave us a different allele. But the dominant one is still going to be what's expressed. So the phenotype is going to be that dominant phenotype, that purple. Okay, and then homozygous recessive means that we have 2 of the recessives, and so that means now we're finally going to see that recessive phenotype, and so it's going to be white. Okay, so notice that by looking at the purple flowers, we don't know if they're homozygous dominant or heterozygous. We just know they have at least one big B. The second letter is kind of a question mark, right? But the white ones, we know what they have to be. They have to be homozygous recessive. Okay, so genotypes are the letters, phenotypes are what they look like. Here's just a nice little chart. This is nothing new, but if it helps you, that breakdown, if that helps you, there you go, there for you. So you all, I'm sure, know where I'm going with this, right? If you remember back to your freshman bio class, it's usually the thing that most people remember. They usually are excited for it. It's Punnett square time, baby. That's right. All right. And so what we can do is we can make Punnett squares to figure out what offspring are going to look like. Okay. So a cross is when like things are bred together, aka they had babies, mated, reproduced, whatever you want to say. And so we can use a Punnett square to help us figure out what are the likelihoods that the kids are going to look a certain way. All right. And so in order to demonstrate this, I'm going to do this with quokkas. And if you don't know what a quokka is, now you have seen the extreme cuteness that is a quokka. You're welcome. They are from Western Australia. They're marsupials, which means they're in the same kind of general category as like kangaroos and wallabies, but they're tiny. They're like 5 to 10 pounds. So like a cat, small cat. They're herbivores, so they eat plants. They're mainly nocturnal, but apparently those little claws can actually, they're pretty sharp and can mess you up if they get angry. But I mean, like, how could that little buddy be angry? There's no way he could be angry. Okay. So we're going to do little quokka Punnett squares. Now, just so you know, I totally made this up. Okay, I could not find any dominant traits in quokkas. I'm sure it's a thing, but Google let me down. So I just made this up by saying that we're going to say that having rounded ears is dominant to having pointed ears. And remember, with our genotypes, the capital letter is the dominant trait, which is why I gave a capital E to rounded and a lowercase e to pointed. And so here's our mating. Okay, here's our thing. A homozygous dominant male is crossed with the homozygous recessive female. Okay, so they mate. What are the genotypes and phenotypes of their offspring, aka their baby? So let's set it up. Here's what our Punnett square looks like. All right, now, it said that dad is homozygous dominant. And we're using the letter E, which means dad is going to be 2 big E's, right? Because we get one copy. So dad got 2 of them from his parents, right? Now, I can put dad's big E's going across the top or going down the side. It doesn't matter which one. Doesn't matter, just pick. So I'm gonna put dad going across the top, and so there are dad's big E's right there, okay? The reason why they're separated is literally this is representing the sperm that dad's making, okay? And the sperm that dad's making isn't gonna have 2 E's, it's gonna have just 1, okay? Because when dad's sperm meets mom egg, they want 2 letters total. So the sperm is only gonna have 1 letter each, and the egg's only gonna have 1 letter each. So when you combine, you get the 2, okay? So that's why we split them up like that. Mom is homozygous recessive, which means she's going to be little e, little e. So I'm going to put mom over here. Again, you could change these up and it'd be fine. Great. All right. So now I'm going to start combining my letters. So this is literally saying like, hey, if this sperm met this egg, what are they going to make? If this sperm meets this egg, what are they going to make? Okay. And so what we're going to combine the letters together, and if there's a capital letter, it gets written first. That's just how we do it. So this would be big E, little e. This next square over here would be big E, little e, big E, little e, big E, little e, okay? So no matter which sperm meets which egg, they're all going to be big E, little e. So the whole question was, what are the genotypes and phenotypes? So 100%, 4 out of 4, however many babies we have, it doesn't matter. They're all going to be big E, little e. That's the only combination of ear genes that their babies can have. And so the phenotype, what are they going to look like? All their babies are going to have rounded ears. Okay, let's do one more practice problem. We're just going to change who the dad is, okay? Instead of the dad being a homozygous dominant, now he's heterozygous. Okay, so we're going to get our grid set back up again. Okay, so dad is heterozygous, which means he has 1 of each letter. So 1 big E, 1 little e. Again, I can put those big E, little e's up here or going down the side. I'll just put them up there. Mom is still homozygous recessive, which means she's still little e, little e. So there she is. And so now, again, I'm going to combine my E's in the different squares. And so, boom, there's that one, there's that one. Okay, so depending on which sperm and which egg meet up, we could get some different combos here, unlike the last one, right? The last one where we always got the same combos for everything. Well, we've got some different variation here, okay? So let's look at our genotypes and phenotypes. If we look, half of the kids, 2 out of 4, would be big E, little e, and half of the kids are going to be little e, okay? And so our phenotype, because big E is rounded, these heterozygotes would produce the rounded phenotype. So half of the kids will have rounded ears, and half of the kids will have the recessive phenotype of the pointy ears, okay? So hopefully that helped refresh your memory as to how to do Punnett squares and how to use some of this vocab. And don't you worry, we'll be practicing with all of this together in class.